All right. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Babak Ashuri. I'm professor of construction engineering and project management here in Atlanta at Georgia Tech. I have the honor to introduce you the topic of this roundtable. We're going to discuss geotechnical risk for alternative delivery projects. As I said, this is part of a Build America Center series of webinar. I'm the director of the Build America Center, the southern region of that, which we cover anywhere from Texas to Florida and any states in between. As part of the Build America Center, this is a US DOT Center of Excellence on project delivery and innovative finance. We are there to provide resources for public and private entities to excel in project delivery, alternative project delivery, and innovative financing. Particularly as part of our conduct, we do lots of research. We got to get a chance to work with several DOTs, including Georgia Department of Transportation. I'm glad Mr. Daryl Van Meter could join us on the panel today. We work with South Carolina Department of Transportation, as well as several other states in reviewing the state of best practice as far as the design build, CMGC, public-private partnership, and especially with the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Build America Bureau, as far as providing assistance for TIFIA loans, assistance to as regional infrastructure accelerator. So at Build America Center, I highly encourage you to check our website, check our resources. If we can be of any help, if we can help your organization, whether public or private, whether a small organization, small cities, counties, municipalities, or the large state DOTs, we are here to provide help in terms of research, training, and dissemination of the best practices, which is one of the examples of that is today. As far as today, I'm going to put myself on mute in a second. I'd like to introduce you to the moderator of the session, Mr. Parker Hamilton. And I can tell you, I cannot find anybody better and more knowledgeable about this topic, has done significant research on this subject and got a chance to work with several DOTs in terms of conducting interviews and understanding the state of best practices by interviewing subject matter experts. Parker Hamilton is our own PhD student in the School of Public Policy. At a part-time capacity, he works with Georgia Department of Transportation as well as a sort of a legal intern. And he has helped us on a number of research projects, and all of them has this theme of risk management. And we are after understanding what would be the balanced risk allocation. What would be that balanced contract, balanced design build, or balanced P3 contract that public achieve all the objectives they want at the lowest possible price, and also private sector would be able to contribute with the best ideas, and some of those ideas would be life cycle, like the best value for the public. So the focus is how we can run that best value contracting in order to achieve the objectives of public versus private, and particularly that risk balance. One of the issues is, of course, geotechnicals, and we keep hearing about that and becoming a deal breaker on many of design build issues as a source of, unfortunately, many claims and disputes, and as a measure that unfortunately leads to project failures, whether from the time standpoint or cost standpoint. I'll pass it to Parker to introduce our esteemed panelists. Parker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashuri, and I appreciate the panelist gathering and also everyone joining us virtually. As he said, I've been a PhD student at Georgia Tech. I've been blessed to work not only with GDOT, but also through that partnership to interact with subject matter experts across the country, interviewing many different folks, including the folks joined here today. So I'd love to share their expertise. Why don't I start introducing the panel. Joining us from Washington Department of Transportation is Jim Cuthbertson, currently an Assistant State Construction Engineer with WashDOT. Jim's a licensed professional engineer and a licensed engineering geologist in the state of Washington. In 1999, Jim became the Chief Foundations Engineer in WashDOT, position he held until 2018. Jim was involved in the first WashDOT design build project in 2001, and was involved in the authoring and reviewing of geotechnical baseline reports and geotechnical data reports for 45 WashDOT design build projects in the ensuing decades. So I'm sure there's plenty we can dig into, Jim. Also joining from WashDOT is Andrew Fisk. He's a state geotech engineer. Andrew has nearly 20 years of experience with WashDOT. His career spans coast to coast, encompasses expertise in civil design, construction oversight, geotech engineering in both public and private sectors. Andrew has extensive experience with design build projects, having reviewed and written numerous GDRs and GBRs, which I'm sure we will get into. From the state of Utah, joining us is Mr. Ryan Ma. Ryan is a principal and technical consultant with Gerhard Kohl, a geotech specialty firm with expertise in providing innovative and practical solutions to infrastructure challenges and geologic hazards across the United States. Mr. Ma has successfully delivered high-profile projects using bid build, progressive design build, CMGC, and as a member of ASCE, he's been distinguished nationally for his contributions. Finally, from somewhere close to me, I presume, is Mr. Daryl Van Meter. He's a nearly 30-year veteran of Georgia DOT, currently serving as Assistant Division Director for the P3 Division, responsible for all projects using P3, design build, CMGC, and other methods. He's been a pioneer in GDOT's leadership on alternative delivery between the agency and the state legislature, been instrumental in developing the research and implementation practices, some of which we'll talk about today. Daryl's also the 2016 recipient of the DBIA Distinguished Leadership Award. With that having been said, we can dig into today's subject, which is, of course, geotechnical risk management, and specifically management for alternative delivery projects. And as the panel knows, and many joining, an alternative delivery project, by definition, has a design that's incomplete at the time of procurement of that private partner for design and construction. And so by nature of that, there's a lot of geotechnical uncertainty and geotechnical risks, things that may or may not have been explored. And I want to ground today's discussion in some of the research that we did that was referenced. We have a report, actually, I'm going to put it in the chat. There's a link to it. That is a report that was generated on the subjects of both utilities and geotechnical risks, but they are framed in two general thrusts, and those thrusts are the following. The first is the informational and investigational practices related to geotechnical information. So what's the scale and scope of your program? How are you going to go out into the field and investigate subsurface conditions? The second is contractual coordination. What do you do with that information? And that's relevant to the conversations of claims and conflict that may emerge in the course of executing the project. So those two in concert, investigation and coordination contractually, form the basis of much of what we'll discuss. So getting into it, maybe Jim, I can start with you speaking to WashDOT's program. As a springboard, ground us in contrast to a bid build world. As you're setting out to put together the geotech information for a design build project or alternative delivery project, how do you square that uncertainty in design, and how do you set about starting your investigative program?
Okay. So when it's a design bid build, conventional, what we call conventional job, right? We own everything. So we are trying to comply with AASHTO standards, right? So we're going to go out and do geotechnical explorations for every element. I mean, every retaining wall, every bridge pier, everything. We know where everything is going to be, and we're going to do a complete comprehensive technical investigation program to get all of the features on the job. When it's design bid build of any kind of form, whether it be progressive, GCCM, conventional design build, like you said, the design isn't done. You don't know exactly where all the bridge piers are going to be or where all the retaining walls are going to be. So the geotech is, using his best guess as to where things are going to be located. And we're trying to get enough information that a a bidder could reasonably understand what the soil conditions are and bid the job appropriately. We're not trying to get enough information for them to completely design the job. They will have to do some exploration once the contract is awarded to finalize their designs. And I hate to use percentages, but I'm gonna toss them out there. We typically try and get, 50 to 80% of the borings that would be needed for final design on a design build job off. Sometimes we can't get that many because of schedule. It's always the fight, right? Because you want to get that project out the door and on the street, and geotechnical work takes time. So we've put projects out where we've only had 20 or 30% of the borings that were actually needed because of schedule and budget constraints and things like that. So, one thing I can say, the more that you can do, the better. Even if it's not exactly on that bridge pier, it's 25 feet away, 50 feet away, it's still valuable information that a design builder can use. So more is always better.
I just add that it's also tailoring to the particular project, the risk, the geotechnical risks of that particular area. How well are they defined already? Do we have pancake geology that we're not really anticipating a whole lot of difference over across the project? Or is there a lot of geotechnical risk? And if so, then we're really pushing to do more field exploration at that time in order to provide, as Jim said, a project that is reasonably biddable, that we can, the design builder feels comfortable with. But yeah, tailoring to the site is important to the conditions that you might find there.
Certainly.
I might add to the point Andrew made that there needs to be enough information to evaluate the concept design. And for example, we were working on a project where the original concept was to go over the existing road. And we looked at it and thought there's an opportunity with innovation and time with settlement to go under. And so the key input was groundwater. When you go over, it wasn't as critical. Groundwater wasn't as well documented. But the moment the design builder decided to change to the under concept, groundwater became critical, where that elevation was relative to the cut. In that case, there's no way that the team could have collected data for that concept because they thought it was going a different direction. And we actually worked with the contractor to collect the groundwater data in advance of the project to supplement it even earlier because it really made our concept work or not. So I think that's the other thing I'd add is the location information. 50% is a great number, Jim, but we have to keep in mind that if the design builder decides to change the approach, there's some risk there that they're taking on.
Yeah, I'll just add one of the things that's really important to remember, most of us DOTs have that same DNA, and that we know every project is unique. We're trying to marry a new concept to renewal of the infrastructure that's out there. We have folks that like are on this call that know well a lot of the geotechnical aspects of the roadways that we have. And we know that we're going to inherit whatever the design builder is going to build. And so from that perspective, each project being on its own, it is really important to try to do enough borings of where the anticipated needs would be. But with, I'll just say, the institutional knowledge or wisdom that's there, we're also trying to help look out for things that we don't want to experience from a poor geotechnical database that we may already have. And so on the one hand, we're kind of giving more borings for where we believe them to be, aligned with whatever the structures may or may not be. But on the other hand, we're looking carefully for what is going to be the end product so that we can give a full spectrum of a biddable project and hopefully achieve the outcome that we were looking for from the beginning.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And, I think each of you invoked borings, and borings have been and remain the gold standard, right, of information. But one of the things that came out in the research was the use of geophysical techniques, also cone penetration testing. Ryan, I wonder maybe you can speak a little to this. What is the value add of geophysical investigations, and when and how might you employ those?
So I think surface wave testing or geophysical testing is a powerful tool, but it's one that comes with a lot of interpretation. And I think that has to be front of mind when you talk about geophysical testing. It's powerful in characterizing large areas. So, for example, if you have a cut that needs to happen and you're worried about shallow bedrock, it can be powerful to characterize these longer areas and profiles, but it should never happen without some kind of confirmatory testing, whether it's a drill test hole or a CPT, some kind of confirmation of where that rock contact or that denser layer is. I'll highlight with another example. We were working on a project. The test hole data went down about 75 feet and stopped. The geophysics was able to develop an image that was a little bit deeper, 125 or so. And what we found in there was between 75 and 125, the shear wave velocities increased substantially. What that meant for the project is that we thought we could develop a lot of resistance if we just took the foundations a little bit deeper into this deeper layer. And the geophysics allowed us to see that. Now, we didn't have a boring to confirm it, and so it became part of a risk discussion. Once we won the project, we were able to go out there and drill the deeper test hole. It drove us to a different foundation type that had some real advantages in terms of schedule. So I highlight that here, that geophysics does give us a better understanding of some things, but it needs to be combined with judgment and confirmation. And I do know that certain clients we work with, they're going to view the geophysics as a little higher risk in terms of data quality compared to other sources. I'm really curious here what Andrew might add to the discussion with his experience, comparing it from a design to an owner.
Thanks, Ryan. I totally support what you're saying. Where the types of geophysics that require a lot of interpretation and verification with a boring or a CPT, super useful, can be informative. In our opinion, as an owner, we would provide that as a reference information and not a contract data, just because of the level of interpretation. There are other pieces of that fall within the category of geophysics, such as suspension logging, downhole suspension logging for shear wave velocities, which we might view that as having less interpretation than some others, and we might include that as a data in our data report, this contractual language or contractual data. But yeah, super helpful for informative, but maybe not something that we would want to hang a hat on, depending on how much interpretation was involved.
Andrew,
Jim, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that brings us to probably one of our next topic points is how do you decide when something should be contractual and how do you decide when something should be reference, right? So, the geotechnical world is chock full of things that are squishy and not well defined, right? I mean, that's part of the art of our profession. And so a lot of those decisions, that you're willing to make as an engineer really kind of fall more in line with reference type information than hard and fast, provable contractual data. So that's always a struggle for the information that we provide.
Definitely. I want to follow on that point, Jim. Before I do, I just want to note for the audience, we do have a Q&A feature, and we will reserve some time at the end. So please feel free to ping us with some questions, and we'll try to address them as they come in. And Jim, you did the segue beautifully because what information you gather, and then how do you put it into a contract, and what are you going to make? What are you going to stand behind in a contractual sense, a legal sense? Maybe here's a time to bring in the discussion of the data report versus the baseline report. Maybe one of you from Washington can distinguish those for the audience, and what might drive you to make a baseline report, and how has WashDOT evolved that practice over the last 20-odd years?
Go for it, Andrew? All right, I'll go. All right, so we have been doing geotechnical baseline reports pretty much with every single one of our design build jobs that we've ever done, because it is a mechanism to define the geotechnical risk and to proportion those risks to either the design builder or the owner agency, right? everybody can get their mind wrapped around boulders as obstructions in drilled shafts. So we like to write clean, definitive baselines. The design builder will encounter 5 boulders in the drilled shafts, right? There's no arguing. You know, you get 5 of them, those are the design builder's responsibility. Number 6, 7, 8, well, those could be eligible for differing site conditions claims. So baseline needs to be clear, defensible, well-defined, no alternate interpretation, right? A poor baseline would be the design builder may encounter boulders. Well, will he or won't he? 1, 10, 100? What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. So we like doing baseline reports to help proportion the risk. It lets us control that. You got to be careful because it is the mechanism to assign risk. So we could say all of the drilled shafts are going to have boulders. That puts all of the risk on the design builder, and you're going to pay for that. We don't necessarily want to do that. We want to make it as reasonable. What do we think it's going to be, right? Now, as for the data report, we do the same thing with the data report. Data reports for us are contractual. It's the boring logs that we collected as part of the development of the project. It might have good quality historical borings. I mean, we might have gone and built an interchange there in the 90s, right? And we know where those borings were. We had them surveyed. We have good data. We understand the lab tests. We might have borings from our records from 1940 or 1950. Don't really know where they were at. They were on some weird alignment that we don't have a map for, don't know where they're located. Something like that we would provide as reference. So it wouldn't be contractual. We wouldn't want to stand behind it. And that's kind of how we draw the line. Baseline reports are contractual, data reports are contractual. And we actually produce this thing called a historic reference where we don't want to hide other geotechnical information because it could be valuable. We want to provide it to the bidders, but it's not going to be part of the contract. It's for their use, their risk. Use it as you see it, up to you, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you
I
make
will add that the historic
Yeah.
data that we collect is used to help us inform when we are drawing that line in the sand for our baselines, right? So, WashDOT's a little bit different where, our baseline reports are part of the procurement phase so that we use the information we have from historical, from the current data that we've collected, other things that we know about the area in order to develop those really definitive lines in the sand for our baselines.
Yes.
Yeah, and Jim, I think you made a great point, which is that to craft a baseline report at the maximally conservative end that says, well, you're going to counter everything at every juncture, that in a way defeats the purpose, right? Because if the goal from the public side is to get the right project for the right price, and you want to be fair to the private sector, but you don't want to be paying for risk in the form of contingency that's not going to materialize. You want to try to gauge that appropriately. Daryl, I wonder if this is a place we can bring you in because you've seen GDOT's strategy to this end evolve. So how might you characterize GDOT and its approach to geotech risk and how it frames it in an alternative delivery setting?
Well, one thing that I would characterize it, and that is that design build, alternative delivery, just as our techniques and our technology changes, my view is that you're constantly seeking to improve upon, depending upon the conditions of the day. And I say that carefully because the department is always seeking to get a best value for what its expenditure is, and sometimes that we have to take into consideration what we're getting for that competitive tension on pursuing something. From what I've seen, I'm originally a highway designer, and we talk about the the contractual coordination, well, we actually have a statute in our state that actually precludes GDOT from compensating a contractor for something he discovers underground. And it's written very, very explicitly this way. And that's designed, it was back in the day that it was really design, bid, build. And frankly, whenever you're doing anything contractually to coordinate some of these risks, you're having to, fit within the legal landscape, the governance that you have in your own state. And that's one of the most important things that I would tell folks, because it's not just a matter of, hey, this is a good idea. You actually have to bring some other disciplines into the circle and make sure that it aligns well with your governance and with your statutes in your state. But physically, what I've seen though for us is as we've had successes, build upon successes in the alternative delivery space, we've been able to kind of craft some things close to an allowance kind of thing, where there still is a bar for the contractor to demonstrate that this is different, but it's not quite as high a bar as a supplemental or a full supplemental agreement on a change in scope. So for Georgia, that's kind of what I was seeing all the way from the beginning, is the contractor has it all. To today, we're a lot more explicit. We're a lot more open to doing more geotechnical exploration and putting some degree of coordination, especially on our bigger jobs, where there's kind of like an allowance built in for a potential compensation.
Yeah, thanks. And I realized I did not send that link, but I just linked the research. And the reason I did is because what you mentioned there, Daryl, about the allowance really reminded me there's such a wealth of different techniques, legal contractual techniques that you might use. So one that I would highlight comes from some projects in Texas from TxDOT, and they use something they call deductible structure. And what it means is there is a project-wide premium, you could say, and then an incident level deductible. So up to 25,000, let's say on a per incident basis, would be the responsibility of the contractor, above which TxDOT would step in. And then on a project wide, maybe there's a $250,000 deductible that's aggregated for each incident and there's all sorts of different, qualifying language to say, you can calibrate it in a way that's strategic, but that's one approach. A different approach is a scope validation period. We've seen that in places like Virginia and Maryland. I'll note there may be some strings attached depending on whether your dollars are federal or your dollars are state. One thing I know, speaking Ryan, I know the state of Utah has done is they've strategically made projects state funded only so as to allow them greater flexibility. I don't know if you know much about that, but one thing that I did hear you mention, Ryan, was this concept of partnering. And we are, in this context, bringing together public professionals, private professionals, trying to get this thing across the finish line. As a geotech professional, how have you seen partnering in the alternative delivery space? And is it working? Is it not working? And what are the lessons we can learn?
So I think partnering is critical. Going back to UDOT did one of the largest design builds that was ever done at the time, and we were involved with it in 1996, the I-15 reconstruction, and there were a lot of great lessons that were learned out of that. The advantage to the project was they could get it done before the Olympics, and that was the big upside. But it meant that they had to explore some innovations and concepts. UDOT's embraced that since with progressive design build and other innovations within the industry. The consistent theme in all of those projects that are successful is partnering. And the idea that we're all going to come to the table to try and offer a solution to make the project a success. But on the other side, the owner also wants to make sure the contractor turns a profit. They want them to come back, take the $100 million worth of R&D research they've kind of done building this last project to build the next one. It doesn't do anyone any good if the contractor goes out of business. And also that the contractor looks at it like, we want to have a good relationship with the DOT. We're going to treat you like a client. And when everyone comes to the table, it offers some advantages and really makes for successful delivery. Now, we have seen here locally, this is a combination of AGC, the general contractors, the consulting engineers, and the UDOT recently updated their partnering manual. It's in progress right now. And one of the takeaways from that was that they wanted design leads, geotechnical, structures, and others that are interfacing in the field to have formalized partnering training so that everyone comes together with the same understanding of what partnering means. I've been in meetings where we've made a $5 million decision one way or another based on partnering. And I think it's very important that we all understand that as an industry, if we want to be successful, we have to come to the table to find solutions. I might just add that one of the reasons that I feel that the state legislature is so willing to invest in transportation projects with a lot of state funds is because they see the return that happens. And it's because of a community effect. We have to get past this idea of winning or losing, and we have to get to the idea that we need to build big projects. We need state support. We need public support. And the only way to do that is through partnering and not keep track of the score, but try and do what's fair.
I would just echo that from, I would say that's one of the key things I would say from Georgia's perspective in recent years. And that is that, in fact, we've kind of got a little mantra our commissioner uses. We want to bring the partnering back to P3s, public-private partnerships. Same thing with design build. And the spirit of partnering, we do partnering on a lot of our projects, and I really believe in its value to make a better team performance. But it also, the spirit of performance really recognizes that each member brings something to the team. You're partners, and you're not just like, okay, gotcha kind of thing. And this is really so important when you're talking about risk allocation.
Thanks. And one thing that's I think been mentioned but not made clear is this concept of a differing site conditions. And Andrew, I wonder if I can bring this back to you, and if you can describe the interaction between the differing site conditions clause and some of the instruments that you all are using, like the baseline report. So how do those two things interact? Because traditionally, states might not want to own, so to speak, conditions in between boreholes that require some interpolation. In essence, that's what a baseline is doing. So how does that interact with site conditions and whether they differ or don't?
Sure. And Jim and I might tag team with this a little bit because he's the contractual person. I'm the geotechnical person in our relationship. So, but okay, I had a couple thoughts here. So one thing, when we're talking about baselines, and Jim was mentioning this, geotechnical engineers, we are conservative by nature, right? We are taking a 4-inch or 6-inch diameter hole in the ground, and then we're trying to extrapolate that over these broad areas. And so it's really outside of our general nature to try to come up with those risk balancing baselines that don't force all of the risk over to the design builder, because who wants to be wrong, right? Like, and so that's a big bar or hurdle for us to get over initially as a profession to right size the risk, right? We're sharing risk. We are trying to, this is again what we're talking about, a partnership, but and it requires first partnership with all the owners, all of the different people with the that have influence, whether it's contractual or our project office that will be administering the contract, that we're all on the same page of these are the risks, the big risks that we see below the ground surface, and these are potential outcomes, and this is how we're, recommending we balance the risk. Are we all on board? And making sure that it's not just a geotechnical or a contract admin person that's responsible for how we balance risk, that it's a community as an owner to build that understanding initially. So, and when we're doing that, and Parker, you're referring to much of what we do in our baselines, right? Of okay, well, we've used different approaches over the years we have a boring, it's 25-foot radius around the boring, 50-foot radius around the boring, whatever we feel is comfortable. And that's those layers are plus or minus 5 feet if we did 5 foot sampling, to try to give at least some spatial baseline for what we think the subsurface conditions are. Other times we might just, as you said, connect the dots, give it a little bit of a variability. And it also, again, is expectations. How well can you define those things? We're fine with drawing that line in the sand of that's how we apportion the risk, but making sure that it's interpretable from both as an owner and as the design builder. I mean, if it's just a gray soil that is medium dense and then goes into dense, it's really hard to draw that line, because it's really hard to for a design builder to say it's different or it's the same. We run into these collaboration issues of if you're not really clearly defining things. We also could get into a different site condition if it's differing from our data report. If that data is different, then it's different. But I'll hand this over to Jim to talk a little bit more on the contractual side.
So contractual wise, okay, so we have, in our state, we have two different types of differing site conditions. Those that are where the contract, something in the contract is different. And then we have the other ones, which are, most people call them type 2, which are things that are unexpected. You find a fuel tank that nobody knew about, and you have to remove that on the job, or maybe there was a pocket of peat or really soft soil. I mean, we missed it in the geotechnical borings. Contractor had no idea it was there. We had no idea it was there. Totally unforeseen condition. The one that's gets kind of really weird is the one where it's something is different with the contract. And we can have a differing site condition for something that is, I mean, it could be a parcel. We could have a right-of-way issue where we don't own that parcel. We missed that in the contract when we put the contract together, and that would be a differing site condition in terms of the information contained in the contract. The contract is different. It's wrong. It's faulty, whatever you want to call it. And we need to correct it. Maybe it involves additional work or a delay to the job while we acquire that parcel or whatever. But I don't mean to get us off the geotechnical aspect, but
no, that's
that's the way that
geotechnical, that type 1 could be geotechnical, right, Jim? Because if, say, we had a typo on our coordinates on a boring log, and so we showed the boring on a particular location, we gave stake plane coordinates for that location, and then all of a sudden, we're actually 50 feet over there. We put the wrong numbers in, or a typo. That would be the type 1.
Something else I've heard, Andrew, is we've mentioned some of this historical information. Well, what if historical boring was set to a different datum, or that's unclear. Those are the types of mistakes that can slip through, I would imagine.
Yes.
Parker, I'd like to just add to the conversation here one more thought. This is a tough issue because it looks very different on the sides of the table that you're on. I have worked with contractors, not that I will continue to do it, but they have come into every job looking for a DSC. I'm going to find some kind of differing site conditions that I'm going to claim. I've worked with contractors that have come to the table and said, hey, I'm going to, this is a little bit different. It didn't impact my cost materially. I'm just going to move in and take care of it. I think one of the things that I've seen that's done, and we don't work as much in the world with where you've got the full baseline reports, is it has to make a difference, right? If we're just going to go in there and, to Daryl's point, play the gotcha game, that's not partnering. If we're going to come in there and say, we're seeing something that's materially different. We've done everything we can to evaluate it and try and mitigate it, but we're stuck here. It's a very different conversation versus the gotcha. And I think that's important, is that as a designer, as a contractor, you should be a good partner and try and take the steps possible to address it. So what if the undrained shear strength's 100 PSF lower? Well, it's very different if you're at 250 PSF versus 5,000, right? And so I feel like, a good designer, a good contractor is going to approach it with, how do I mitigate this change before they come and ask for money or just come and say, gotcha.
Right.
Yeah, those gotchas work both ways, right? I mean, there's things where, a contractor can go, oh, I got you on this one. And then there's things where the state will go, oh, no, you didn't provide us proper notice. Sorry, your claim is invalid or whatever. So,
And
Right.
I've been on the
that
owner
goes back to the
side.
whole partnering thing. That's why we want a partner. So we don't get into these uh fist fights or head knocking things.
I've been on the owner's side where they were trying to defend against a contractor that was being unreasonable, at least in my opinion. And I even made the statement, "Oh, well, these conditions are more favorable over here. Are you going to give us money back?" And I think that just highlights the point of partnering, having a good plan, but conditions are going to change because that's the nature of our business. Do they materially change the job or not?
Yes.
Right. And that's the word, Ryan, is material. Not only is it different, but is it material to the outcome of the project? And to the end of the
Hold on.
baseline.
I want to interrupt you. I want to make sure
Yeah.
because we're talking geotech. That material is not geotech material. That's the legal form of material where you can replace it with significant or
Right.
important or yeah.
No, that's a good specification. And I think to my mind, what the baseline report and even the data report do is they try to bridge this gap between the perspectives on the table of what are the conditions. In other words, differing site conditions, differing compared to what? So if we can establish a shared understanding of these are our conditions, then we're all talking the same language. So if 6 months later something happens in the field, we agree, you know what, that does differ, and we can be reasonable partners and try to work through this in a manner that's appropriate. We've got just 10-15 minutes remaining. I want to reiterate to the audience that there is a question and answer feature or even a chat feature. We encourage your questions. One thing I wanted to ask the panel is, I think most of our conversation today has been grounded in design build. But we have experience here also with GCCM or CMGC, even maybe some early progressive design builds. To your mind, does this conversation shift when you shift to, let's say, CMAR, CMGC, or what's the same and what's different and what should people know?
I'll add in from a progressive perspective. I've done several large progressive projects, 500 million, 300 million, and I feel like if there is a risk that you already know that's going to be hard to control, liquefaction, lateral spread, property ownership utilities, as Jim's highlighted, there are some real advantages to progressive because the owner is going to be riding along with you, looking at the same information, dialing things in the same way as the contractor. I feel like the owners understand the risk the best in a progressive design build environment. That's my opinion and position. And I've been in conversations with the DOT with liquefaction and lateral spread in which we laid out a couple options and they said, well, have you tried this? We would accept this as an alternative. That conversation would never happen in a design build environment. In a progressive and even CMGC, it can. So I do feel like that there are certain projects that are just better oriented for CMGC or progressive if there's some high risk elements.
Yeah, you get
Getting
the
that all
opportunity
out
to
first, right? That's
yeah.
important. If there are those high risk elements, being able to have clear communication, to be on the same page, to get owner approval ahead of time, so you don't have to bid the risk or build that risk into your cost. There's an advantage there, and from our experience or from my experience too.
Well, Georgia has only got one CMGC underway right now, so I really can't speak with from a lot of background. But this I would offer, and that is that the nature of the contractor and the designer of record, uh, the contractor brings a lot of expertise on means and methods, and that's one of the inherent benefits that's really in design build. But when you have that pre-construction phase, bringing means and methods to the original design early on is really powerful in respect to some of the geotechnical risks, because there's, depending on the project, a contractor that's well experienced with certain geology is going to have excellent means and methods that are going to bring good value for the transportation dollar that will influence that designer's decisions.
Thank you for that. We do have one question from the audience, and the question is, on a design build, would you recommend allowing or requiring proposers to perform their own borings during the bid phase, especially for an ATC? How do you alter risk ownership with this approach?
Okay, so in our state, we do allow that, and we actually kind of encourage it. However, there are, I don't want to say, well, I'm going to say issues with doing that, right? You're trying to get access to usually limited access right away. You know, it, DOTs are we're risk adverse by nature, and so having other people come onto our property and drill and do things when we're not in that contractual relationship can get really weird. We would require special permits and things like that. My agency is not very accommodating to that as we probably should be. But that is something that we do allow and would encourage it at certain times.
Yeah.
I don't have a good answer for you.
I would say from Georgia's perspective, we've done it different ways. And in some cases, we have offered opportunities for drilling, that we would do it. They would bring it, like them at these locations. In some cases, we've allowed them to go out there, proceed on it, to do the drilling. They just have to go through a process for getting a permit. And even though some of us in delivery are not used to it, we can coordinate that through the right parties at the district level that are used to permitting folks to getting out there and being safe and what have you. But at the end of the day, the project specific circumstances really bear into, is there enough time and is there enough value potentially for allowing them to do that? There are cases that we can all cite where, that would be very valuable for the dollar if they've got an innovation and they really want to keep the confidentiality long enough to pursue that, to bring it to the table. It's in the DOT's best interest to try to allow that if the time and circumstances permit. So it's one of those things where you need to keep an open mind, allow some time for that potentially to take place, but project specific and procurement specific matters. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
I at least heard one anecdote maybe that this too is a system that might be gamed, right? Where if you have competing firms with, maybe you have an ATC that you're trying to guard, you could submit for the DOT to do or otherwise yourself do a boring totally off the beaten track, not close to this ATC, as a means of trying to preventative sort of espionage. But
Parker, I'd like to just add there. I think this is a great question. I don't think it should be required. I don't think they should require
Yeah.
everyone to go do boring. That's just a waste of time and resources, right? But I've been on projects, and I'm going to give you a couple examples. We did ATC, which I mentioned before we went under. We went and collected data. The department wanted us to validate what we could do. They thought the groundwater was in a different spot than we did. So that was very helpful. I've also been involved on large projects with settlement risks. We're talking settlements of 50 to 60 inches, right? So big settlements, and time was a big deal. There was a contractor that said, you know what, I'm going to go build a test fill in an unknown location nearby, and we're going to see how long it takes. And rather than waiting for design, I'm going to go get started building this now. And so I feel like, and then that informed us as we're going along. We saw the settlement was coming out. We got a sense for how long it was going to take. We could even get secondary estimates that were real. And so I feel like that it really comes down to the contractor's appetite and interest in the project. It's important to note that the stipends that the states provide, they cover maybe 20 to 30% of the cost. These contractors are sinking millions. In the case of this test fill that we built, it was substantial. They went in $600,000 on a test fill. They went big, and but to them, they felt like it was worth the investment. And so I feel like you have to leave it up to the contractors, but I think you need to find a way to incentivize that effort. You shouldn't make them share the data they've collected with everyone that was there. If the contractor's willing to take that risk, they should see the reward. That's the way it should work. And they understand that bidding and risk way better than we do.
Thanks. I think we have time for one final question, and it's in the Q&A. And the question is, how can an owner use best value versus design build low bid to apportion geotech risk for stormwater or other tunnel projects? What do you recommend for technical criteria?
Okay, well, my DOT, we do best value awards, and so when we issue our ITP, we will actually put in scoring criteria for different elements, give them a technical score, and for example, on your drainage thing, I mean, we could give technical credits for schedule, for innovation, for whatever. And that would be, when we get the bid price, the technical points come off the bid, and then we determine an apparent best value. That's the way we do all of our awards. A lot of times it does work out that we're awarding based on the low bid because the technical points aren't enough to sway the outcome. So that's one of the things that we do struggle with, is trying to make sure that there's enough technical credits there to make a difference in the apparent best value determination. So I mean, we want like 20 or 30% of the contract value in technical credits available, because you can see that big of a swing in just low bid prices or in bid prices.
Right. Oh, another question. What are best practices to actually ensure that partnering that we've talked about by both DOT and the contractor during the delivery of the project? It's easy to talk about partnering, but doing the partnering is a lot trickier, especially when there's, sometimes big sums on the line. So, whomever, feel free to jump in.
I'll just start a little bit because I had this idea when we were talking about it earlier. It's really those clear expectations to make sure our, as an owner, expectations are aligned with the design builder's expectations, that everybody has the same understanding of some of these risks or some of the expectations in the mandatory standards that are part of the contract. Partnering gets tough when expectations don't align and you have strife. There's stuff that's happening that really a partnering relationship would help mitigate. And if we start to do gotchas, then all of a sudden that training that we did at the initial part of the contract just goes out the door. So people have to believe in the partnering, and then they've got to feel like both sides are willing to meet in the middle, and that we're all on the same page with the expectations. But I'll pass it off to others in the panel.
Yeah, that's something that we struggle with even on regular design bid build jobs. I mean, we have partnering on those as well. So the whole thing is just trying to educate and train our people that are working on the jobs that, this isn't the enemy. The contractor's not the enemy. They're there to build this job for us. And, we shouldn't stand in their way and cause problems. Now, we should, and everybody has the need to make sure that the contract is enforced, that they do build things properly, that they do the design work necessary, that they do have the materials documentation required. But we don't want to be a hindrance to the process.
Yeah. I'll just say
So it's all about education and, gosh, I hate to say it, but play nice,
I would say that partnering is one of those things that it really enhances the team working together. But when you think of the differing levels of people that are working for both the owner, for the contractor, maybe for the owner's reps, there exists a need to kind of set up a culture. It's not like this has been done by this group 100 years before. You're setting up a brand new culture. And a lot of the folks that are involved with it, well, they just want to do a good job. And sometimes that conflicts with the notion of really partnering and working together truly as a team. And of course, there can be the other way too, whether or not we do want to enforce the contract to make sure that the public is getting what it's paying for. But there's a need, I would say, to kind of have multiple levels involved to help sustain good partnering, uh, kind of some level of executive support, and like maybe challenging some of the things that are being said and done to kind of make sure it sets the tone for the ones that are doing the work so that the spirit of partnering can be sustained over time.
Yeah,
I might
something.
just add to Daryl's point there, because I think it's well made. It is a leadership. It starts with project leadership. I think you know you're in trouble when you start sending angry emails. And it's amazing how the partnering discussion changes when it's in person versus in an email. And I think a wise project manager or a good design lead, when he sees those emails flying back and forth, they stops and says, let's sit down and talk about this together. It's amazing that difference that it makes in person versus just sending letters and emails.
Yeah, something, Daryl, I think I've heard you say is every project you are in essence creating a new organization, you know, and so setting a culture for that organization and doing so in a way that's intelligent and tries to instill good habits and good culture is really how to execute success.
Yeah, it's definitely not a hands-off thing for leadership to facilitate design build to be successful. It's not hands-off. You have to be involved. You have to kind of promote the good practices, discourage the bad practices, and embrace true communication. A lot of us were trained under a gentleman from Indiana there, Dr. Tom. Anyway, he said he used to use these words, communication is mandatory. And that really goes a lot of different directions on a design build job because communication is needed from the everyone that's foreman or whatever on the job to the leadership of the project. Communication is absolutely mandatory.
Well, a key aspect is never lose sight of the fact that as an owner, it's your project. I mean, we tend to give these things over to design builder and say it's their baby. They're going to carry the water. They're going to make it happen. No, 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 no. This is as the owner, it's your project. The success or failure of it depends on you. You have to be involved in it. So,
That's wonderful. I know we are on the top of the hour. I'm just wondering any of our participants might have a question or comment or something to add to this risk discussion.
I'll just add one point that's more
Please.
of a point, and that is that in Georgia for our largest design build finances, we have started to deploy a dispute resolution board, a type of thing. And at the beginning, when we were starting to, a lot of the industry was really asking for some kind of this kind of mechanism. And as we studied it and really have deployed it, it really strikes me that it's another way of communication to occur in a setting where there's some trusted experts that are probing and they're asking questions, and everybody on the team is there answering those questions. So I'm in favor of not just partnering, but of any kind of dialogue that the team has where you can actually, talk candidly about things that may pop up and you might be able to avoid disputes instead of it arising to a geotechnical boondoggle that is going to cost somebody a lot of money. It's like this kind of thing is really important to be looking on the horizon to see what's coming up in a candid fashion and talk about it.
I'd add one more thought here in closing. If you want something, state that you want it. If you think you need ground improvement, make sure that you say you're going to do ground improvement here, at least to this amount. Be clear about that. The second part of it is time. The second the geotechnical engineer is awarded the project, he is behind schedule. Anything you can do to help him get out drilling sooner, collecting data faster is going to reduce risk for the project long term. Even if it's early notice to proceed from the contractor to get to work, that is very valuable. And when you look at the schedule, do everyone a favor and make sure that it's got time in there for the field studies and laboratory testing. Don't just make it an afterthought. Make sure that it's a call out.
Get that.
That was a great point. Any final thoughts from our friends in the state of Washington, Andrew or Jim?
I don't know what to tell everybody to do. We've had some great success using alternative contracting, and we've had some dismal failures. We've learned more from the failures than we have the successes. So,
yeah, as they are saying, worst practices sometimes are more valuable than best practices. Yeah.
Yes.
Not making. Yeah, but we want to really end this on a high note. I think it's a great tool in the toolbox, design build, progressive design build, or any form of alternative delivery. But it's just different. I think Daryl mentioned that, all of you mentioned that, this whole partnering that you have been talking about, and it's different way of doing business. And I think it takes a mental shift, as we call it, within the agency. Hopefully interdepartmental issues needs to be resolved. I think, Daryl, you mentioned that you got to always check with your procurement, your statutory requirements, with your procurement law. Your legal counsel needs to be comfortable about the things that you do or you can or you cannot do. But that looks like any time that we can add some valuable information or avenues for further exploration. Maybe I asked this, and I know we are about 5 minutes after the top of the hour. I have not heard about the terms a scope validation period or proposal validation period, proposal assessment period. Virginia Department of Transportation has used that, successfully using that currently. I know Maryland and Georgia looked into that, use that probably for one or two projects here and there. It's not common, but any of these further investigation, could that be considered within that scope validation phase?
Well, we kind of have call it a scope validation phase, in that when we're awarding our contracts, we're doing the apparent best value. So they are giving us a proposal, we're reviewing it, we're assigning technical credits and points to that. So there is a somewhat of a scope validation process built in. We don't actually call it that, but
okay, sounds great. How about the experience from Utah? Do they have any?
No, I think what you're describing isn't something that we see common in the Intermountain West in terms of scoping. It's an interesting idea, and I think there's some power to it. Not something I have a lot of experience with in the Intermountain West.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you again. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Daryl, Jim, Ryan, Parker. Sure. As always, you did a wonderful job moderating the panel. As we said, in the next few days, we're gonna post a recorded session. But please be in touch. Everybody here, if there are members of your company or members of your organization or professional networks would like to know more about that, I think one resource that Parker provided, that research report that we completed for Georgia Department of Transportation, might be of interest for some of you. We love to hear your thoughts, and at Build America Center, and as I said, I'm only involved in the southern region, but at the national level, University of Maryland is involved, Virginia Tech is involved, Purdue and Stanford University. We're going to have more of these sort of dissemination every month. We at least have 1 or 2 sessions. So consider subscribing to that and attend as many of as you can. With that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And thank you again, the panel. Have a wonderful day.
You're welcome.
Take care. Thanks again. Thanks, Parker.